Okay, this is Chapter 4, Section 6, Part 2, Complex Conjugates.
I can't find the presentation on Canvas.
Alright, so we have pairs of complex numbers in the forms of a plus bi and a minus bi, where b is not 0, and I is our imaginary number, and these are called complex conjugates. So if we have a whole number plus the imaginary and minus the imaginary, these are complex conjugates. So it's really just the imaginary part, the positive and the negative, that make them conjugates. In example 2, which was what we did on Friday, we had 2i as our answer and negative 2i as our answer. So anytime we have the positive complex number, we're going to have its conjugate, which is the negative, as one of our answers as well. So if our function is a polynomial function with real coefficients and a plus bi is an imaginary zero of f, then a minus bi is also a 0. So if we have one, we have the other. So always we're going to have, if we have one, we're going to have its conjugate as well. So this works for imaginary numbers. So if we have the positive imaginary number, we need the negative. Also, if we have square roots, if we have the positive square root, we need the negative as well. So anytime we see an imaginary, we need its conjugate. Anytime we see the square root, we need its conjugate. All right, so let's look at example 3. So all of this, we don't even need to read. It doesn't matter. All we're looking at are our zeros, which are 2 and 3 plus I. So it gives us 2 of them. Do we have another 0 that's not explicitly given to us? 3 minus I. Perfect. We have its conjugate, which is 3 minus I. So here we have 3 zeros, 2, 3 plus I, and 3 minus I. We write these in linear form, so we have x minus 2, x minus 3 plus I, and x minus 3 minus I. So it's always x minus our 0. And by 0, I don't mean the actual number 0, I mean one of our solutions as 0. All right, so we've done problems like this before. What should we do first? Anybody remember?
You take the x minus 3 plus I and distribute the negative.
Awesome. We distribute the negative to everything behind in the parentheses. So we have x minus 3 minus I and x minus 3 plus I. So here we have conjugates again. We have our first term, which is x minus 3, and our second term is I. So when multiplying conjugates, we square the first term and square the second. So we could FOIL this if we wanted to, but our shortcut is squaring the first term, subtracting, then squaring the second. So here we have x minus 3 squared minus I squared. So if we were to FOIL these out, we would get this. But we still need to simplify this. So how can we multiply x minus 3 squared? How do we simplify that? So x minus 3 times x minus 3, and then we need a FOIL. Because anytime we see that squared, we're multiplying it times itself. So x squared.
Minus 6x plus 9.
Yes, but you're skipping a step, so I'm just going to write it out before we simplify. So I have x minus 3, x squared minus 3x minus 3x plus 9. But we'll combine the like terms in the next step. Next, I have this I squared. What is I squared? So does anybody remember what I is? The square root of -1. So if we square I and square the square root of -1, what's I squared equal to? -1. So I squared is -1. So this is minus a -1. So what happens when you subtract a negative? It becomes a plus. So this is +1. Now we can combine our like terms. So we have x squared minus 6x. 9 plus 1 would be plus 10. So we just multiplied our two imaginary parentheses up here. We multiplied this one out and this one, and we got this. So now we just need to multiply that x minus 2 in there that we started with. So we're going to take this and just drop it down and multiply it. So we just need to make sure everything in our first parentheses gets multiplied to everything in our second. So x times x squared is x cubed. X times -6x is -6x squared. X times 10 is 10x. What's -2 times x squared?
-2x squared.
Thank you. And -2 times -6x.
12x.
And -2 times 10.
-20.
Awesome. And our last step is just simplify and combine like terms. So we have only one cubed term, so we start with x cubed. What comes next? -8x squared. So that takes care of our x squareds. What's next? 22x. And then what's last? -20. So this is our answer. Any questions? So here, I distributed the negative here to the 3 and to the I. So this became x minus 3 minus I and x minus 3 plus I. So I grouped together the x minus 3's here just because those are the same thing. So that's our first term, and the I is our second term. And since they're conjugates, because this one is a minus and this one is a plus, that makes them conjugates of each other, we can square our first term, which was x minus 3, and square our second term, which is I, and subtract them. So that becomes this x minus 3 squared minus I squared. And then x minus 3 squared, we just FOIL that out, because it's x minus 3 times x minus 3. And then I squared is actually -1, so minus -1 became +1. Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Okay, we have 3 more examples that we do the same exact thing. So hopefully by seeing it again and again and again, it'll start to make more sense. All right, on the next slide, it says that we can check our answer by taking the 0 that we started with. So it gave us that 2 was one of our zeros, and we plug it into our function that we got. So like the answer that we actually got, we plug it into all of the x's, and we get 0. And if we get 0, then we know we did it right. We can do the same thing with 3 plus I and with 3 minus I. So when you plug it in and get 0, you know you have the right function. All right, let's look at the next one. So here it gives us -1 and 4i as our zeros. Do we have another 0 that's not explicitly given to us? -4i, perfect. So we're going to put this into our factored form. So we have x minus -1 times x minus 4i times x minus -4i. So it's always x minus your 0. And now we can go in and clean it up a little bit. So what's x minus -1? What does minus a negative become? Yep, this becomes a plus. So this is x plus 1. X minus 4i stays the same. And then this becomes a plus again, so x plus 4i. Everybody with me so far? What do we do next? Right, we're going to multiply these two together. And they're conjugates, so we can square our first term and square our second. So we have x squared minus 4i squared. X squared is just x squared. Now we need to figure out what 4i squared is. When you're squaring two numbers like this, you need to make sure you square the 4 and you square the I. So what's 4 squared? 16. And then what's I squared? -1. So this is 16 times -1. And it's already a minus 16, so what does this become? Perfect. So it's x squared plus 16. So this -1 makes this a plus. All right, so we just multiplied all of this out and got this. What do we do next? Multiply by x plus 1. So we're going to bring that one down here. Here we have a binomial times a binomial, so we can just FOIL these out. So x times x squared gives us what? And then x times 16, 16x. 1 times x squared is just x squared, and 1 times 16 is 16. What should I do next? Yep, just rearrange them so it's in standard form. So we have x cubed plus x squared plus 16x plus 16. So they just have to be in descending order, starting with our biggest exponent. So this is our answer. Any questions here? All right, let's go to the next one. We have 3 and 1 plus I square root 5. Do we have another 0 that's not explicitly given to us? Perfect. 1 minus I square root 5. So we just need its conjugate. Now we can just plug these into our factored form. So we have x minus 3, x minus 1 plus I square root 5, and x minus 1 minus I square root 5. What should we do next? Distribute the negative. So this becomes x minus 1 minus I square root 5, and x minus 1 plus I square root 5. What do we do next? Perfect. We see we have conjugates here, so we can do our shortcut and just square the first one minus square the second one. So x minus 1 squared is x minus 1 times x minus 1. Just have to FOIL these out. So x squared minus x plus 1. And now we need I square root of 5 squared. So remember, when we square this, it's like squaring the I and squaring the square root of 5. So we have I squared. What is square root of 5 squared?
5.
Just 5. Perfect. Because the square root and the squared cancel. So I squared times 5. And there's a minus in front. Don't forget about that. What is I squared? Negative 1. So what does this become? What is it? But if it's a negative, because it was a negative to start, we subtract them. Times a negative 1 times 5. Then it's positive 5. Because this is a minus, then times negative 1 times 5. So this becomes a positive 5. What do we do next? Combine like terms. So x squared minus 2x plus 6. What's next? Multiply by x minus 3. So we got to make sure everything in our first parentheses gets multiplied to everything in our second. So x times x squared would be what? And then x times negative 2x, negative 2x squared, x times 6. On to the next, so negative 3 times x squared, negative 3x squared, negative 3 times negative 2x, plus 6x, and negative 3 times 6, minus 18. What do we do next? Combine like terms. So we start with our x cubed. What comes next? Minus 5x squared, perfect. Plus 12x, minus 18. Awesome. Good job. Are we missing any zeros here? 1 plus 3i. What else? Negative square root 2. Perfect. So we had this square root 2. We need its conjugate also, which is negative square root 2. Good job. What do we do next? What's next? Put them into our factored form. So x minus square root 2, x plus square root 2, x minus 1 plus 3i, and x minus 1 minus 3i. So I wrote them a little out of order, but this one went with this went with this one went here, and this one went here. You can write them however you want. For me, I like to put the ones that go together, the ones that are conjugates with each other together. So that's why I wrote the square root 2's first. So let's start here. We're going to multiply these two out. So what should we do? So these are conjugates. So that means we can do our shortcut, square the first minus square the second. So x squared minus, what's square root 2 squared? 2. Done. That's it. It's our first 2 multiplied together. We could FOIL these out and get the same answer, but it would just be a little bit more work. So just know our shortcut, square the first term, square the second. All right, let's move on to our second 2. What should we do first? Distribute the negative. So we have x minus 1 minus 3i and x minus 1 plus 3i. What do we do next? They're conjugate, so to multiply these 2 out, we just square the first and square the second. So we have x minus 1 squared minus 3i squared. First thing we should do is multiply x minus 1 squared, so we're just FOILing. So this is x minus 1 times x minus 1, which gives us x squared minus x plus 1. So I just FOILed it out. All right, now to negative 3i squared, or minus 3i squared. What do we do here? Perfect. Got to make sure we square both things inside the parentheses. So 3 squared would be 9. I squared. And this is minus. What's I squared? Negative 1. So take away the I squared, make this a plus. So I just multiplied the negative by the negative 1, that's I squared, and it becomes plus 9. Everybody with me? Any questions on that? What should I do next? Add them together. So we have x squared minus 2x plus 10. What's next? Awesome. Multiply this times x squared minus 2. So we just got to make sure everything in our first parentheses gets multiplied to everything in our second. So x squared times x squared is what? X to the 4th. X squared times negative 2x. Negative 2x squared. Then x squared times 10. It's 10x squared. Now we can go on to negative 2. Come on, Casey. Just kidding. Yes, you're right. And then negative 2 times x squared would be negative 2x squared. Oh, I see what you did, Casey. And then negative 2 times negative 2x. So plus 4x, and then negative 2 times 10. Perfect. What's our last step? So we start with our x to the 4th. Greg, what comes next? Minus 2x cubed. What's next, Greg?
8x squared.
Plus 8x squared.
Plus y.
Awesome. Good job. All right, so that's it for the notes. Yay.